The Fairy Whispering podcast explores the multisensory pathways to connect with the other world, such as listening to messages in owls' hoots, singing to mermaids in a moonlit cove, or knowing what to give a gnome when they come to dinner. I'm Claire Caisley, a fairy whisperer and researcher. Take my hand and I'll guide you safely through the enchanted twilight woodland where they are waiting to meet you. If you enjoy this episode and would like to support the show, you can sign up to my Fairy Whisperer Patreon community or make a one-off donation via Buy Me a Coffee. You can also follow me on Twitter at Fairy Whispering. I also have a YouTube channel, Fairy Whisperer. I hope to see you in one of these places. See links in the notes for this show. Hello everyone and welcome. I've recently returned from a magical family holiday in Scotland where we stayed at the smallest cathedral in the UK. I enjoyed wandering in the grounds, especially the fairy woods where a green lady is said to be the guardian. Green ladies and green men are part of Scottish folklore, and if you've had any experience with these, I'd love to hear from you. A note for my regular listeners who have probably noticed the new podcast theme tune. This wonderful track is called Oxygen and it's by Third Girl from the Left, which is a new project for talented singer-songwriter friend Nikki Swan. I love the ethereal quality of the track and that it was inspired by Nikki's connection to nature and the local landscape during the pandemic. She is one of the many people who were inspired to create during that time, including myself. I'm also thrilled to say that Nikki is a future guest on the podcast. See links in the episode description to listen and download her music. I've got a fantastic episode for you. I'm so thankful to my guest, Emma Welsh, for reaching out to me via Instagram. And I always feel so honoured to listen to and share people's accounts. Emma is an artist and a writer. She has had fairy experiences since childhood. Emma shares some very special childhood fairy sightings with us, including a fairy market, a friendly goblin, a pixy, and a dream visitation of gnomes on ponies. On my Fairy Whisperer YouTube channel, you can watch the video version of our chat where Emma shares her artwork of the fairies she has encountered and a fascinating fairy photo. And I'm giving a shout out to my wonderful patrons whose support helps me to create this podcast. I'm very thankful to them. It's a kind and welcoming community to be part of. There is a wonderful bonus episode for my patrons where Emma shares an account of being fairy-led, followed by a possible time-slip experience. She also speaks about her ability to regularly find four-leaf clovers with the help of the Fae. If anyone has tried to find these, including myself, you'll know that it's not that easy. I've never found a four-leaf clover. I remember my sister finding one as a child and we pressed it in a flower press. I also share a fairy photo that Emma sent to me. See the link to Patreon in the description to join us. Enjoy the episode and I will return to you at the end with some final thoughts. Hi everyone, welcome to Fairy Whispering Podcast. I'm Claire Caisley and my guest with me today is a lady called Emma Welsh. And she is very passionate about fairies. She's a fairy experiencer and she works creatively with fairies. And I got to know Emma through Instagram. You contacted me through Instagram, didn't you? And said you've experienced fairies and you sent me some of your artwork and you write about fairies as well. So welcome, Emma.
Hello, thank you.
Thanks for coming on. And we've just been having a look at some photos that you sent me today that I hadn't had a chance to look at. We've just had a look now before we came on. They're fascinating. So, do you want to speak about those? So, should we start with the first one that we looked at, which was and I can share these on my website for people, if that's
Yeah,
okay with you, for people to see when I put the show notes up on there. Um, can you just talk about situation you're in when you took the first photo with the fairy garden in the background? That's really
yeah.
interesting. Mm.
So, I mean, I've always had just a real connection with fairy and the other realms, the unseen. Just from being a really small child, it's just something that's always been there for me. Um, Obviously, I've had experiences during childhood and in my adult life as well. But I seem to have quite a lot of people around me that also experience fairies or ghosts or other
Oh,
spirits as
yeah.
well.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so that particular picture, it was just in my own backyard. Um, I had sort of created a corner for the
Mm.
fairies. I'd built a little stone circle using crystal chips, and there was a fairy door, and obviously the fairy figure that you can see in that picture. Um, and then I also sort of left little offerings there, little blessings and things, just for the home and my family, and yeah, it was just the energy just built up around that area to the point where I thought, oh, I might actually just take a few pictures, and just in that one particular photograph, there was this just band of rainbow colour.
Yeah.
I feel like when you look, like zoom into it, you
Mm.
can see faces and figures almost in the colours.
Mm. Mm.
Um,
And we were saying it looks like a collection of bubbles, isn't it? I'll have a proper look later on my big screen and see what I can see in there. I love
yeah,
looking at photos and analysing them. Um, but yes, first impression is it's like a group of bubbles or orbs, maybe. So
yeah,
lots of different spirit energies or fairy energies.
yeah, and it had a really nice feeling at the time because the garden obviously is just sort of like a yard with decked areas.
Mm.
So I was trying to just encourage a bit of life, a bit of colour back into the space, and planting flowers in pots and things. And I obviously thought a little area just dedicated to the fairies will definitely encourage that the life and the colour back in. And it just felt nice. The energy felt really nice, almost like a thank you,
Mm.
joyful feeling as I took the picture.
And how long after you'd finished creating this garden? I mean, what were the circumstances? Had you just literally finished and you thought, I'll take a picture of this now? Or was it a
It
couple of
was
days
like
afterwards?
a few days later, yeah, a few days later. So
Mm.
the plant obviously settled into the soil a little bit, and yeah, and I just sort of went out and left a little offer in there and
Oh,
captured that photograph.
what did you leave for them?
I tend to leave honey,
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
or milk, a little bit of fresh milk. And at the time, I remember I had actually collected a couple of acorn caps, and I was
Oh,
using those to put just a little bit of honey and a little bit of milk in for
yeah.
them. I have been known to leave a little bit of bread or leave a little bit of cake. Just depends what my intuition tells me, really.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Those are all traditional gifts, aren't they, for the fairies? And I know from my own experience that they love honey.
Mm. Anything sweet,
Yeah.
don't they?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's and so you'd created this garden with this intention of attracting fairies or just to say
Mhm.
thank you to them.
a,
Yeah.
a choice. them as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
just them in, because obviously I always feel where there's fairies, there's life. They help everything grow and blossom and bloom and take fruit. So yeah,
Yes.
just a little bit of joy and a bit of goodness into our space.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I've spoken to quite a few people now for this podcast since January who have had experience of fairies in gardens, either as children, or reconnected with them as adults. I'm just wondering, have you had early experiences with fairies? What's your sort of history with connecting with fairies? Is there other experiences you've had
Yeah,
throughout your life?
yeah. I mean,
Mm.
there's a couple from my childhood when I was about, I think, between the ages of about 4 and 7, where I used to actually every morning, I'd wake up, and this happened numerous times as well. It wasn't just like a one-off; it happened on a fairly regular basis. I'd wake up in the mornings, and there was a quite a big sort of ivy plant that grew up the front of the side of the house. So it grew up sort of next outside my bedroom window. So there's often birds singing and nesting in there. So I often just used to wake up and lie there and just listen to the birds singing outside. But I used to see little people. I always just called them fairies. It's just a knowing. I just always knew they were fairies.
Mhm.
Walking backwards and forwards or to and fro on my bedroom windowsill. So my curtains were
Oh,
closed.
yeah.
And obviously the light would be shining through. So I only ever saw them as sort of silhouettes or shadows through the
Mm.
curtains. But I would sit there for quite a long time and just watch what they were doing. And they would be just chatting, walking to and fro, carrying bags on their backs or dragging sacks sometimes along the floor. Some of them had wings, some of them didn't have wings. There was male and female. And that's the thing, even though I only ever saw them as silhouettes through the curtains, I could see them so clearly and see
Yeah.
all the little details of their clothing and just the little details on them. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, I just used to watch what they were doing and be so excited to see them. And I used to sometimes creep out of bed and creep silently over and whip back the curtains to see if I could catch a glimpse of them, and there'd be
Yeah.
nothing there. And then I'd whip the curtains again and go and creep back into bed, and within a few minutes they'd reappear again and just carry on
Mm.
with their day-to-day business. But it all, like, as I aged, obviously,
Mm.
and we moved home and stuff as well. Um, Obviously, I didn't necessarily have any more like that
Mm.
in other houses. It just seemed particularly to be that house. But I did have a fairy experience as well. I think I was about 11, so it was a little bit of time in between. At my nan's house, and that was actually to do with her garden as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually send this in for the fairy census, this
Oh,
account.
really? Oh,
Yeah.
love to
And
hear this. Yeah.
it was actually put into one of the monthly newsletters as well. The
Oh,
story
wow.
was
Yeah.
wonderful, because sadly my nan is no longer with us now. She passed away a couple of years ago. Um, but it was lovely because I actually got to read or reread my account to
Mm.
her. To
Mm.
had been put in the newsletter, so it just sort of reconnected us again with this
Oh.
story. So yeah, it was just quite a wonderful experience, really. But so my nan, she was a keen gardener, and her garden wasn't like a really big space, but it always felt so full of life. And obviously, when she was a little bit younger and more able-bodied, she used to grow vegetables and runner beans, potatoes, loads of flowers, and there was just always so much life in the garden. And that was where me and my brother, my younger brother, and my cousins, we spent quite a lot of time with her after school and in the holidays and things. And we'd always just congregate out in the garden. But it just felt so magical. The garden just felt so magical, and it didn't seem to matter what time of year it was always blooming with plants and whatnot. But yeah, this one particular afternoon, I remember it was midsummer, and it had been a really hot day, and my nan had a couple of those reclining chairs with the cushions on that you can.
Oh yes, yeah.
And then I was lying on one of those, and I was just in the most relaxed state I think I've ever been in. So peaceful, and it was the smell of the flowers and like the warm air, the warm breeze, and I could hear my nan pottering around in the kitchen, like making dinner. And I was just in this zone out in the garden. But after a little while, I just felt this urge to get up and go into the house through the patio doors that had been open the whole time. And I went in and I sat on the sofa, but I sat looking towards the open patio doors in this relaxed state still. And it was like slow motion, a figure that I've always called a pixy, because that's just the closest description.
Right. Yes.
What I think to describe what I saw. But he was only a shadow form.
Yeah.
But again, a little bit similar to the figures behind the curtains. I could see the details of his clothing, and I know rough, I can see he was only young looking, and he was obviously a male, and he had almost like a bluebell flower little hat, because I could see the curled petals of his hat, and he had matching little curls on his cuffs around his wrists and his ankles and around his neck, so I could see the curls of the petals. He just in slow motion drifted in through the open patio door. He was still moving, but really gracefully and slowly through the air, and then really, really quickly, like quick as a flash, he flew down, and there was a tiny little my nan had this little folding table, like a child size folding table and chairs that was obviously folded down next to that the open patio doors, and he sort of swung across the slats of the table underneath.
Oh wow.
He swung down. I saw again his fingers reaching out as he was grabbing, and his legs. I saw all the details, and then he swung out really quickly and nipped behind the TV unit that was in the corner.
Oh my gosh. And what happened then?
Just
disappeared.
Disappeared. And I was so excited but gobsmacked what I'd just seen. And I remember obviously running over to the TV stand and looking behind it to see if I could see anything. And I knew I wasn't going to see anything really, but I just couldn't believe it. And I just remember turning around, going straight out into the kitchen and saying, "Nan, I've just seen a fairy." Yeah. And all my nan said was, "Well, aren't you a lucky girl?"
Oh, wow.
What I saw. And she believed me, and she just my story. And
that's so special, isn't it? That there's so much I want to ask you about this, but had she had fairy experiences, do you think?
Well, again, as I got older, I think she probably did, but didn't ever say anything about it, because it was just so out of the blue that I went into the kitchen and said, "I've just seen a fairy," but it was not a surprise to her at all.
Right.
It was just, "Oh, aren't you a lucky girl?"
Yeah. And sorry, carry on. Yeah.
And I've just always thought, I wonder if she had experienced something similar like that
Mm.
and not said anything about it. But I mean, my nan knew how much I love fairies as well.
Hmm.
I always remember colouring in, the is it Cicely Mary Barker, the flower.
Yes.
I remember as a little girl having a colouring book of the
Hmm.
flower at my nan's house, um, and I coloured all the pictures in, and then we sat for ages and cut all the fairies out, like around the edge of the fairies, and went and put them in the garden.
Oh, wow.
So that's just another little memory of that space.
That's so special. She sounds like a really special person.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. And
he was. But to read that story like back to her before she
yeah,
passed away, really special. And she remembered it. She remembered that happening as well. So it was really a really lovely bonding experience.
yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? And I expect that was very magical for her. Maybe it was validating for her as well, because maybe,
Yeah,
I don't know, we can only speculate, can't we? But she was obviously close to the landscape, to nature, to create that garden and working that closely with nature. She might have had some experiences. Yeah.
it's lovely. But I sort of it's something for me that as I got older, I think obviously a lot of people when you hit your teenage years,
Mm.
um, anything like that, it sort of gets
Yeah,
shut down, doesn't it?
it does.
Remember being sort of a little bit frightened of it and embarrassed almost about being myself, really, I suppose. So I sort of hid that
Mm.
side of myself for a long time. Wouldn't really talk about it. Um, and obviously, as I've got older again, I've opened up to it
Yeah.
more, and it's a lovely feeling.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, it feels like you're reclaiming something, doesn't it? I think a lot of people I've spoken to are having that experience, including myself, where they've had childhood experiences or sensed. For me, it's very sensory, sensing there was something else. Um, and I also had a grandmother that had a beautiful garden that I spent a lot of time in as a child, which I feel gave me that sensitivity to nature and other realms.
yeah.
Yeah. So, um,
I often do
yeah,
think that there's something in. I don't know if it's necessarily in the blood or in a family line somehow that to have this fight or this knowing is sort of passed along.
I think it is. Yeah,
Sometimes.
well, I can only talk from my experience because I know, I mean, some people don't have that experience, unfortunately, do they? They don't have parents that are understanding of these things.
Yeah.
But I know my dad, he's very sensitive to supernatural. I think my grandmother probably was, but like you say, people didn't talk about it so much in those days. It was kind
Yeah.
of quite taboo, wasn't it, for that
Mm.
generation to talk about. But I'm interested, can we go back to your first experience with seeing these little fairies on your windowsill? Because I'm interested in that idea of them being shadowy
Mm.
and but you're seeing them in detail. So it's almost like do you mean that you're seeing them psychically in
Yeah.
detail? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's definitely and obviously now as an adult when I experience spirit or fairies, sometimes it is like you don't necessarily see them with your physical eyes, you see them with your I always call it my inner vision. My
Yes.
inner
Yeah. Mm.
um see them with your heart, not just your eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could see like I said, I always remember distinctly there being different heights. They were all only ever sort of like a few inches or so,
Yeah.
but
Hmm.
different heights, different genders. And there was one in particular that I saw quite a lot.
Mm.
Um, I remember seeing him probably the most out of all of the little characters, but maybe it's because he stood out more.
Okay.
Sort of recognised him, and I've always just known him to be a goblin because
Oh,
that's the closest creature that I can describe him as was a goblin. Not a
so all right. So what did he look like then? 'Cause that's really
yeah,
interesting that you've
I
seen.
did. I have drawn a picture of him actually.
Have you? I wonder if do you have it there or could you send it to
Here.
me?
Um, do I just hold it up?
Yeah, just hold it up because I can always. Oh wow. Oh yes, you sent me this one. Yeah. So like green skin?
Yeah, green skin, and his clothing was sort of greens and browns as well.
Mm.
But I always just remember he was quite squat, and he often was pulling a bag like a sack along the ground, like pulling it along the
Right,
ground for
right.
him.
Mm.
Um, and I could always see he had a long pointy nose and a long pointy
Mm.
chin because I
Mm.
often like a side angle.
Yeah,
Um, and he had what I've always said to be like loose rag like shoes and a
right.
little hat, like a pointy hat, but they were sort of loose and
Yeah.
droopy looking, like that material
I
almost.
yeah. So you didn't feel scared. You say he's like a goblin. I mean, I know there's people that have had quite scary
Fairy goblins, yeah. No,
experiences with them, but you didn't feel he had a scary vibe or
no,
no?
no. And this little scene,
Mm.
then as I've aged and I've thought back about it, they never paid any attention to me being there at all. It was like they were just going about their business and not paying any attention to me at all. And it felt busy. Like I
Mm.
always pictured that as like a market scene,
Oh
or
gosh.
like a main route that they took.
Oh right. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps because this just ties in with so many things I've been researching recently. Upcoming episodes that I'm
I
doing.
was so desperate, Claire, to see them. I remember that
Yeah.
feeling. So desperate to actually like see
Mm.
them curtain, but every time I tried, they disappeared. But then they would reappear again, and I'd just sit and watch them.
And
I've asked my
yeah,
mum actually as well if she remembers me because I remember telling my mum that I've seen fairies on the windowsill,
yeah.
and my mum remembers. My mum
Mm.
remembers me saying that to her as well.
How
Um,
how old was the house? Was it quite an old house? And do you know?
um, I'm not exactly sure
Yeah.
how old they. It was just sort of like a normal terrace house.
Right.
Um,
Mm.
we were sort of one on the end. I think we were the last on a row of three or four, but we were on the end house.
Mm.
But like I said, I always
So
really loved that bedroom
yeah.
because of the big ivy plant that grew up outside the bedroom window there. Because I always remember hearing the birds singing and the light sort of shining through. And that was the thing. There was never anything on my bedroom windowsill, like ornaments or anything like that that could cast shadows or
Yeah.
anything like that. It was an empty space.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, just always been.
So you're the end terrace, and was
Mhm.
your bedroom overlooking like a pathway or something? Then were you looking at the end?
So if you
Or
were looking at the house from the garden path,
yeah.
my bedroom would have been on the top left.
Right.
left one at the front of the house.
Okay. So what was at the front of the house? Was it like a road or
Not a busy one though. It was just sort of
no?
like a full housing estate on a slight hill as well. We've
Oh,
sort of
right, on a bit of a hill.
on a hill.
It'd be interesting for you to, and after this, I can give you some links to, suggestions to look at old maps of, because that's a possibility that what was there before your house was there could have
Yeah,
been something, like well, it might have been a special hill.
yeah.
It been
Very likely.
sorry,
It's very likely because the
yeah,
place where I grew up is very old,
right,
um, very old land. I mean, where my parents are
mm,
now, it's not that far from that house. Everyone sort of stayed really close by to where they were born and bred. Um,
see,
so the house that my parents are in now, I mean, that land there goes back to the Doomsday Book. It's
okay,
very old
yeah,
around that
mm,
area. There does seem
yeah,
to be lots of like local legends and
oh,
ghosts
right,
and things like that from around that area as
mm,
well. That's actually a
yeah.
project in the making of mine. Is I'd like to do a book on the local stories and legends.
Oh
And
gosh, that'd be amazing. Yeah, you should do that. Um, yeah, and it might be like a spirit road. It might be a fairy pathway that's going through there. There might be ley lines, energy lines going through there. So yeah, it'd be interesting to um, explore that
yeah, and
history,
that's, I've
mythology.
always had that sort of sense of feeling a place, feeling that the
Yep,
energy of the place. Whether there be fairies there or other types of spirit, I get a sense of feeling
yep,
in certain places.
yeah.
Um, yeah, there very well could be. And I've never thought of that. It's
Mm. And also the ivy, because I've been speaking to somebody about experiences of fairies and ivy. I'm sure I've spoken to a couple of people about that actually, or I've heard people talking about fairies liking ivy and living in ivy. So it could be something to do with that as well. There's quite a few different factors, aren't there, that could have
it's
attracted the fairies. Yeah. Look,
they're
including
just
you.
experiences that have stayed with me
Mm,
all my life, and I can remember them as clear today as I could back then.
so
Um,
lovely. Have
I
you?
never
Sorry.
questioned what it was. I've just always known
Yeah.
what it was I saw.
Yeah, sure. Well, we do, don't we? Because we feel it in our hearts. We just know that instant knowing. There's no questioning of it. It just, well, that's what that was. And so, what color clothing did they have?
Um, well, like I said, the little goblin
Yeah,
type one was
let's
I
have a
saw. No. Do you want to have
yeah,
another look at
have
him?
a look at him. Yeah, that's such a fabulous drawing.
No, thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but I've drawn a pixie um, that I saw a few years ago, and I've drawn him with a little pouch on his
Oh,
belt. Yeah, and he also had, I think he had a shield as well, so he had a little pouch and
yeah. So he had um, the little pouch hanging from his belt.
yep,
Um,
mm,
and I said it was always the sack on the floor that looked like it was really heavy, and he couldn't
right.
move it, dragging it along the floor, and
I wonder what he was carrying.
But like I said,
Okay.
a few times I remember seeing a couple of male, I suppose they might be classified as pixies. No wings, but little
Yeah.
male figures.
Mm.
Um, I'm not sure about sort of details of how like age and things with them, but they definitely
Mm.
had long sleeve tops on and
Mm.
trousers. And I'd see those two quite often dragging like a big sack along the ground in pairs. So they'd have like one side each
Oh gosh.
and be dragging it along like it was really heavy along the floor. And
Yeah.
I remember seeing that numerous times as well,
Mm. So
of them sort of running in pairs. And then you just see some walking by, you'd see some stopping and having a little chat, just like we do when we go to
yeah.
the supermarket.
Yeah. So
Stop, you can
oh
stop
my
and see
gosh.
people and have a chat, and yeah, and it was literally like I wasn't there.
Mm.
They never sort of seemed to notice me at all, apart from when I obviously jumped up and whipped the curtains back. But yeah, it's just always felt like I've always felt really lucky to have experienced that,
Yeah. Yeah.
not only just once, but numerous times in that
Mm.
house.
Mm.
Um,
It does sound like a fairy market, doesn't it? It
yeah,
sounds, and you read these stories, these old stories about people coming across fairy markets. I know there's a story from Somerset of, I think it was a shepherd on the Blackdown Hills that came across a fairy market, and it's very much like you're
like
describing.
that.
Yeah, just very bustling and doing
And
various things. Yeah,
I never heard any sound
right.
each.
Yeah.
I could never. I never remember hearing them speaking or
Hmm.
hearing any noise. It was literally just like visual.
Yeah. And what
Um,
what about the pixie that you saw that came into your grand's house? Did he make any sound?
no, again,
No.
no, that was completely silent. And he was a little bit bigger as well.
Right.
In size. Um, I'd say more. He was more sort of doll, Barbie doll type size. He
Okay.
was
Yeah.
a bit
Mm-hmm.
bigger. Um, but it was the way that one sort of came in from outside through the open patio doors, and the net
Yes.
was blowing. My man had like a long net at the window, and that was blowing in the breeze. And he just glided in midair and
Mm.
sort of stayed in the same place for a little while, gliding, and then really, really quickly just dropped down, swung under the table, and disappeared behind the TV stand.
That's amazing that he sort of arrived quite slowly, slow enough for you to be able to see him and then change speed. I, I, I'm just thinking about films that I've been looking at um, of these anomalies and that they move so quickly. No
Yeah,
wonder we don't see them because I think these beings do move really super fast. So for that, and you're saying you're in a relaxed state because I suppose I've got a bit of a theory that when we're in this relaxed state of mind, then we're able to slow down. Time slows for us, when you're in a meditative state. And that then helps us to be able to see these beings. Is that what you're feeling? That's why you saw him?
yeah. It was
Mm,
the sense of it was just like absolute joy and
yeah.
peace all at the same
Mm,
time. I've never experienced a feeling like that
mm,
again. Um, just absolute peace and like happiness, like a giddy happiness.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and it was just wonderful, wonderful thing I've experienced really. But yeah, I do think there is something about when you relax like that, it does open you up to seeing these things, especially in this modern life as well, the modern day living. Everything's fast paced, isn't it? And
Yeah, seems to be getting faster as well. So you have to really make the effort, don't you, to slow down and stop. Um, Something I just thought about. Oh yes. So did he make eye contact with you? Did
I
he
think,
see you there?
yeah, that I very much had a feeling that he was aware of me being
Mm,
there. Yeah, and it's the way that I felt almost driven to go in at that exact time.
yeah,
It was just like, again, I thought, oh, I've got to go in in the house, um, for no reason really as well. So yeah, I do think it was possibly him that made me go in, just so he
yeah.
could show himself, I suppose, to
That's
me.
that's
Um,
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah, to follow that.
it's
Mm.
like when I'm thinking about it, I can see it replaying in my mind. I can see it so clearly.
Oh, such a special experience to have, isn't it? Just
Oh.
have you drawn him?
No, I haven't actually. I
Oh,
haven't seen him. That is on my list of things to do, though. I think.
yeah,
Um,
be good, and to draw the little trooping market fairies as well, or what you remember of how
yeah.
that looked would be so fascinating to see. Are there any other fairy? You sent me a picture of a gnome, I think, didn't you? Have you
Yeah.
got a
So
gnome?
this was just recently, actually. I
Oh,
had
great. Yeah.
about a dream visitation because it was right on. Oh, what have we just had? Was it Beltane, wasn't it? We
Yeah.
just had, yeah.
Hmm.
It was right on over Beltane.
Right.
I
Oh my gosh.
had what
Mm.
I call a dream station. I've
Hmm.
never had sleep paralysis or anything like that, but for me, it's that in between phase. So
Yeah.
in between night and day, or in between sleep and wake, sometimes I get things come through. um, but yeah, so I'll just hold him up for you. I had little
Oh, look. Oh, he's on a little pony.
white pony.
Oh,
Um,
look.
I only
Oh.
saw one of them.
Mm.
Um, and there was, I don't know if you can see, but there's like sort of coloured, it's not very good, coloured mist around.
Right. I can sort of vaguely see some misty colours. Yes.
And it
Yeah.
was pinks and blues, like a shimmery mist.
Hmm.
Um, so I couldn't quite see through. It was so dense, but obviously I saw him on this little pony, but I knew there were many more of them. It was almost like a little out on a hunt or out on a ride. And there were all these little ponies just galloping around, and I
Oh,
just saw a glimpse, yeah, of one of them. And he held his hand up
oh, did he? Oh,
and
like,
back, yeah, as if to sort of acknowledge. And then off he went into the mist again, and the little pony went off galloping. But the ponies had
wow.
really tight little legs, really short little legs. So I tried my best to to try and capture
Oh,
the drawing. Yeah, and it was just like again, sort of like a little glimpse, just of one of these little gnome-like beings, and off they went back into the mist. So that was quite.
that's amazing. So I wonder what they were doing. I wonder what they were doing out on their ponies. I suppose just, yeah. Did you get a feeling of
It just felt like having fun.
just having
Um,
fun?
for the
Yeah.
time of year, yeah. But they
Mm,
they all looked. Even though I only saw one of them,
mm.
I know that all wore that typical garden gnome type outfit: the brown trousers, the blue long sleeve top and a little red pointy hat.
So sweet.
Yeah, it
That's
was so sweet.
amazing.
It was the pony that really stood out the most because it was so tiny, so
Oh,
tiny and sweet. And that's the thing, I've always had just such a strong connection as well with nature and animals. I mean, I've worked
mm.
with animals now
Yes.
as well. And I don't know, there's something, they're all part of the same
Yeah.
system, aren't they? I don't
Mm.
understand it all exactly, but
No, I think animals, well, I feel animals connect us with the other
yeah.
world. I mean, definitely um, my cat speaks to me telepathically. I know when she's waiting to come in. I know when she's hungry. I just know what she wants.
Mhm.
She does, and sometimes I'm in bed and I've let her out, and in my head, I'll hear her because she likes to chirrup, and I'll just hear her do a little chirrup, and I think, Missy's at the door, and I'll go out and she'll be out there.
Waiting.
Yeah. So I think they are all part of a similar realm, aren't they? The
Yeah,
the
definitely.
communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've always felt fairies are like guardians of nature,
Yes.
caretakers almost,
Mm,
like the essence of that in a form,
yeah.
kind of.
Mm,
But yeah, so that was quite a nice experience. And again, it was that sort of half awake, half asleep phase when those little
yes.
gnome characters appeared. And that was just a
Yeah.
glimpse.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've had those similar flashes, and I think it's almost like they just take that opportunity, don't they? Of
Mm. She can
they,
see us.
she can
They're
see us
gone.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because I've spoken about it before. I had a flash of I think I was talking to somebody a couple of days before this happened, and I said, "Oh, yeah, I've not seen. I see fairies like gnomes and these quite sort of integrated with nature sort of beings, very sort of earthy. I've not seen the little winged fairies ever." And this was a few years ago. I was lying in bed one morning. Oh no, it's at night. I was drifting off to sleep, and I had this flash of all these little white figures, winged figures, and I couldn't see any features. They were just like bright white light with wings. A group of them. It's almost like, yeah, we exist as well.
Yeah.
Just
And you
showing,
see, yeah,
just
I think
showing
they do
me.
sometimes just they find an opening,
Mm,
won't they? And they
yes,
take part to show themselves to certain
yeah,
people for a second and then they disappear again.
yeah. Yeah, and all these experiences are, well, from what I'm learning and the experiences I've had, are quite brief, aren't they? But
Yeah.
it sounds like, and I've just been actually releasing an episode tonight where I've spoke to my friend Jane Pearl, who had childhood fairy experiences, and she used to spend hours watching fairies at their work at the bottom of her garden, and she'd just go and sit a bit like you were watching the fairies on the windowsill, and she just watched them for hours going about their work, and they were kind of just carrying on with what they were doing.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah,
happening, isn't it? It's
yeah,
something's happening there.
mm,
But it is just like I said, something that has always been there, and I did shy away from it um, for quite a long time. But like I said, I enjoy it again now, like being open and
mm,
saying what I've seen, really, because once you start opening up and telling people your experiences, you realise that there's a lot of people that have seen
Yes.
similar things and still are. And it's just wonderful. And I
Mm.
really feel like that fairies and that sort of spirit have got so much they can teach us and so much
Yeah.
joy that they can bring us. And I think we really need that,
Mm.
as if the human race really needs that right now, I think.
Totally. I feel this is so important. I'm thankful for people like yourself coming forward, because if we can all, I know some people don't want to share their experiences, and that's fine, but more of us that do, then hopefully more people will come forward. And it's just showing that these experiences are very real. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we're just normal people carrying on with our lives, and these extraordinary things happen.
Yeah.
And there's more to life than what's being broadcast out there by mainstream, by the media.
Yeah.
But
And I can't help
yeah,
but think that it's possibly something that we all once knew about.
yeah, definitely, yeah.
We've forgotten it.
Mm,
We've
yeah,
forgotten that that connection is there and that it's very real. So yeah, it's just lovely to find other people as well that have experienced similar things. And
yeah. And
yeah,
I'm sure a lot of people will enjoy listening to this chat, and have a lot of resonance. And if there is anyone watching this and you've had an experience, there's also which about, the fairy census, which Dr. Simon Young is compiling at the moment. He released 2014 to 2017 a few years ago, and he's working on the release of the next few years now. Um, so if anybody's had an experience, I'll put the link in the notes for this show. That's a good place to report your fairy experience on there, which you've just said that you've done, Emma.
yeah,
Um, and then it just all contributes to this body of this record, really. It's so important, so that in future generations, people can look back and say, oh, yeah, well, this is what was happening at that time. And people have these experiences. It's not just a thing that of the past, of the distant past, that
yeah.
people continuing to have these experiences, aren't they? Yeah.
And I sort of think that the world's it's often in turmoil, isn't it? Especially at the
Yeah.
moment. I just think fairies have a way of coming back into like human consciousness almost around times like that.
They are.
Um,
They are. It's really
yeah,
important for us to connect with
help
them.
us
Mm.
connect with nature, and I've done a lot of like inner child healing and work and things as well. And I think they can teach you a lot about that and being your authentic self and sort
Definitely.
of dancing to the beat of your own drum.
Yeah. And like you say, they are the ones that want to work with us. They are about joy. And
Yeah.
I'm convinced that's why I've connected with them, because they brought a lot of joy to my life. And every time I want to, I think, oh, I'll move away from this path, they pull me back onto it. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, you're going to stay on this path now, Claire. This is what you're doing. You're working for us.
And I think I've felt very much like that
Mm,
um, since I've sort of worked on myself a lot and I've opened up this side of me again. I feel like I'm being guided to talk about it more, create more.
yeah, you should. Yeah, definitely.
People
Mm,
and events and things are sort of being put in my path. And if I try and deviate away from it, it's almost like little fairies on my shoulder pulling me. Say no, you have to say yes, you have to go this way.
yeah,
Keep
they do
going.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
So
just going to keep going.
I was going to ask about your work. Is there anything you want to share about with what you're doing with your fairy drawings and your writing? Have you got
Yeah.
plans?
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I just sit and draw fairies, paint them as they sort of pop into my mind. They then seem to appear on my page. I'll often write little poems about them or nature, folklore, um, and obviously I've got my fairy experiences and friends and family. They've had
Mm.
encounters with fae as well. So yeah, I decided to make a little book,
Oh,
um,
great.
pile it all into one place. And I had a little bit of a download while I was out in nature the other day because I was really struggling with a title for the book as well.
Hmm.
But it just came to me while I was out in nature the other day to call it the Fairy Folio because it's
Oh,
kind of a portfolio of my
yes.
little paintings, really, and encounters and experiences. So yeah, currently still working on that. Um,
And
but I've also got the Instagram page that I made just to
yes. Mm.
have a place to share photography and poems and art with anyone that might like them.
Okay, well, I can put that in in the description for this video and on my podcast description so people can
Oh,
find you. Yeah, and
yeah, that would be lovely.
any other links you have, because I expect a lot of people will be interested in seeing your pictures and reading about what you're doing. I certainly am interested in keeping following what you're doing.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
are there any other,
It comes from the heart.
yeah,
It comes from the heart. I just follow my intuition um and while I'm out dog walking, etc., I just really take in everything that's around me.
yeah,
And I just think it's wonderful to try and retain that sense of like wonder
definitely. Mm.
in the world around you because it's so easy to not notice it in your
Yes,
day-to-day life. So it's yeah, I've worked quite hard to cultivate that again in my life. And
oh,
now I
that's
can't turn it off now.
brilliant. Yeah, I know it becomes a habit, doesn't it, when
Yeah.
you start to see the world in that way, in that with that
Yeah.
sense of wonder. Um,
Because I think that's our natural way of being,
yes,
really. I think that's how we're all meant to be, but life happens and it shuts you down, doesn't it? A lot of the time.
it can do. And in a way, I think those experiences where I have shut down at times, um, I'm I'm thankful for those as well, because when I've come back to this path, it's been all the more um, stronger. The feeling of being on
Mm.
this path has been like, oh gosh, this is what makes me happy. So
Yeah.
it's almost like the dark times I've had have been, oh right, okay, this is what it can be without that way of seeing the world. But when I'm on this path, life's so much better.
Yeah, that's
That
it. That's it.
contrast. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that's just what their message is really,
Mm,
is to be yourself, unapologetically you, because that's your real true state. And if you try and hide it or deviate from it, it makes you unhappy.
it does. Yeah.
I've come through quite a lot of sadness in life,
Yeah.
and at one point, not too long ago, a lot of people really close to me sort of passing away and getting poorly and whatnot, and just those years of being sort of worried about being myself, who I
Mm.
am, and what I enjoy, um, and to just be yourself, connect with nature, get outside, and just try and sort of connect with nature and the fairies. They've got a message there waiting for everyone, I think.
Definitely, nature connection is what brought me back to my well-being years ago. That was the key for me, to get out into nature, do my creative stuff like you're doing. Yeah. So
yeah,
thank
it's
you.
magic, isn't it?
It is magic. There's so much magic at our fingertips that is just available in nature. And just going out for a walk, doing some art, doing something creative, or just doing what you love, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And
it's never wrong, is it?
No, and life will find, you'll find the path. It's like we're either fearful and stay stuck where we are because we're afraid to move from what we know, or we move towards what we know brings us happiness, and then everything just falls into place, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's what I've...
And the synchronicities happening.
Yeah.
Don't they? And places and people and experiences just appear in your life.
Yeah. And there's so much that you've said tonight that's resonated with me and has given me validation. So I'm sure there's lots of people. That's what I love about these chats, because I think, oh, okay, yeah. I understand that now. And I'm sure there's lots of people out there listening to this, when they hear this chat, that they'll have some aha moments as well. So thank you ever so much, Emma. It's been wonderful speaking to you. And yeah, I'll put your links for your Instagram and anything else you want me to share in the notes of the show. And yeah, thank you for being on this Fairy Whispering podcast. It's been brilliant speaking to you.
Oh, thanks very much.
I always make some notes when I'm listening back to the episodes and editing and thinking about what I can say at the end. There are a few things that came up for me that seem to be quite common in experiences, and that is the state of mind that the person is in. It's quite usual for people to be in a very relaxed or meditative state when they have these experiences. So Emma was in bed, feeling very relaxed when she was seeing the fairies on her windowsill as a child. Then when she saw the pixy, she said that she felt very relaxed. She'd been in the garden with her grandmother and with friends and feeling very relaxed, then felt drawn to come inside, and that's when she had her pixy experience. And then the gnome experience came in one of those very relaxing states of mind as well. So like Emma said, it's almost as if the fairies look for these doorways in our consciousness to show themselves. Also, a common theme that's come up in speaking to guests is this idea of reclaiming these experiences from our childhood. We are often drawn away from those times when adolescence comes along, or maybe there's a big change in our lives, and then we're somehow drawn back to these experiences during a time of healing or reconnection with the things that we love, the things that we enjoy. So this is a common theme as well. During this time, what's happening in the world, more and more of us seem to be coming back to connection with nature, connection with the other realms, and that's a recurrent theme with the guests that I've spoken to so far on the podcast, and other people in my life that connect with nature and fairies. Emma's experience of the market also put me in mind of Christina Rossetti's poem, The Goblin Market, but in contrast to Emma's experience, the poem is about more malicious goblins that are hoping to tempt two women with their forbidden fruit. Whereas Emma's experience was very peaceful, very friendly. The fairies weren't aware of Emma being there. That made me think that maybe this was a fairy path that was going past her home, or that her home was built on a fairy path, and the fairies were just carrying on with their business and not really bothered. Perhaps they just couldn't see Emma. Perhaps this was such a routine for them that they weren't aware of the house that was built there. It's a really interesting account. Also, the other pixy that came in from the garden was very aware of Emma. He made a concerted effort to connect with her, to draw her attention, and they had eye contact, which I found really lovely to listen to. What a wonderful experience. And it's interesting that he changed speed. Again, I spoke about this with Emma, this idea of being in a meditative state, and that she was able to see him in slow motion, connecting with her, and then as soon as she was aware of him, maybe her consciousness state changed, so that then he speeded up and disappeared from her view. I don't know what the answer is, but these are just ideas I have listening back. I really liked Emma's viewpoint about not apologising for who you are, and to get out into nature and connect with it, and to follow what brings you joy in life. I think that's a wonderful thing to end this episode on. Be you and do what brings you joy. See you next time. Remember to keep your heart open and to be the change.